Welcome to Season 2 of War of the Words podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Besen, and we begin with Election Day rapidly approaching. And if Republicans take over Congress, it's going to be a disaster. They are telling us exactly what they intend to do. The question is, are we listening? Former Vice President Mike Pence tweeted, quote, "I've got news for President Biden. Come January 22nd, we will have pro-life majorities in the House and Senate, and we will be taking the cause of the right to life to every state house in America." Well, you heard it from the former vice president. Republicans have a radical agenda. They want to outlaw abortion across the country in all 50 states. They said, we're going to leave it to the states. We want liberal states to have liberal abortion laws, but that was a lie. They are now embarking on a 50-state crazy tour to make sure that they impose their religious values on all of us. And, I look at people like Mike Pence and I think to myself, this man has run for office his entire life. And he's had one purpose running for office, and that is to impose his religion. I suppose when he was a young man, he tried to use conversion instead of coercion. But I suppose somewhere along the line, he got frustrated and said, I'm no longer going to try to convert anybody. I'm going to run for office and try to pass laws and get people put on the Supreme Court who can then impose my church rules on everyone. I never joined Mike Pence's church. I never wanted to be a part of it. I heard what he was selling and I rejected it. I said, I don't believe this. This goes against my beliefs. I'm not joining your church. I don't want a membership card. And Mike Pence and people like him joined the Republican Party, and they made it a theocratic institution. What they are doing is trying to make us belong to his church and have membership cards to his church, whether we like it or not. And I can tell you, for one, I'm sick and tired of having people like Mike Pence try to jam their religion down our throat. And anyone, especially any woman, who votes Republican has got to be out of their minds. They're surrendering their rights. They're surrendering their ability to have autonomy over their own bodies. And any man who supports the Republican Party is out of their mind. Because this is a party that goes against liberty. It goes against freedom. It wants to tell people what they can do with their bodies, what they can think. This is a party that must be defeated in the upcoming elections, or America might be going down the tubes. But people are distracted. The economy, the gas prices. You know what? Gas prices, they'll go up and down. They fluctuate. Inflation, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Joe Biden has little to do with it. It's about supply chain. It's about COVID. It's about every place in the world having to recover their economy after having to go into lockdown over COVID. But people don't want to hear the truth. They want someone to blame. The Democrats. Well, what the hell are Republicans planning to do to help the economy? Nothing. I don't get Mike Pence personally. He's hanging around trying to make nice with all the people that literally screamed, hang Mike Pence. Why are you hanging around with people that wanted to hang you? He's delusional if he thinks he's going to get back in the good graces of the MAGA crowd. This is a man who is trying to revive his political career. But remember, if you cross dear leader, if you cross the orange sun god, your career is over in the Republican Party. It's done. You're toast. And Mike Pence, in their view, committed the worst sin of anybody. And that is he went against the big lie. Donald Trump said, Mike Pence, you can overturn this election. You can throw out the results of millions of voters and install me, Donald Trump, as president. And Mike Pence, he thought about it. He consulted with a lot of people, but even Dan Quayle, the former vice president, told him, you cannot do this. It is unconstitutional. And Mike Pence finally came around and did the right thing. Is he a hero for that? No. He just did the bare minimum. He did his job, which was not to interfere with the will of the people. But the MAGA crowd hated it for him. Donald Trump tweeted that Mike Pence is a coward. He thinks Mike Pence is a coward. And so for Mike Pence to think he's going to recover his political career, I don't know what he's smoking. I didn't think he did smoke, but apparently he does. And it's pretty good. I want some of it. I think Mike Pence and people like him really need to reevaluate the party that they have created. Liz Cheney is another one. I love what she's doing on the January 6th committee. But she helped build this party up and put all these extremists in place. And you know what they did? They turned on her, just like they turned on Mike Pence. It's like these people never learn. And I don't understand how anybody gets in Donald Trump's orbit. Everybody in his orbit gets destroyed except for Donald Trump himself. Everybody gets screwed by this con artist from Queens. They don't seem to learn. I don't know what it is about him. I think that's what drives liberals crazy. We see through this guy. He's a fraud. He's a con artist. We know exactly who he is, what he's about, what he stands for. It's as clear as day. Mike Pence's strategy to get back in the good graces of the people that want to, again, to hang him is to have a war on the woke. If you look at his Twitter page, it's all about the woke. We're going to attack the woke. He tweeted just the other day, quote, "One of the most troubling developments of the past year has been the Biden administration's wholehearted embrace of the woke left's all-encompassing assault on culture and values." What are they going to do about the woke anyway? And all these Republicans are, we're going to stop the woke. How? You're going to muzzle people? You're going to tell them what they can say, what they can think, like they do in communist China? Sounds like you want a totalitarian country where you demand what other people say. Or if they disagree with you, oh, they're in trouble now. That seems to be the direction of the Republican Party. Only we, the people, can stop them. We can stop him by voting. So I hope you get off your couch. I hope you get off the internet, because we have enough online slacktivists who do nothing but whine online. Get out and vote, because the consequences, if we do not retain the Senate and the House, but certainly one of the two, is calamitous. And we're going to get into later exactly how America is going to fall, because there are consequences for elections. I mean, we see that in Britain right now. Liz Truss just had to resign after destroying the economy. She turned the pound into the ounce in a week. Brexit. How was that passed? That was based on lies. The Russians put out an enormous amount of propaganda, as well as the right wing in Great Britain. And they passed Brexit. And I bring that up not to talk about what's going on in the UK, but to talk about the fact that when people make poor decisions and elect the wrong people and elect people who have fantasy-based lives and lie like the wind, lie as soon as they breathe, it does not end well. It never ends well. And it will not for the United States if we make a wrong decision in November on Election Day. We began the show talking about Mike Pence, and he's the quintessential hypocrite. He is what the religious right has come to represent. I mean, what do evangelicals stand for today? I don't know who they are. They used to stand for family values, but they're a joke. They've made a mockery of family values, if you ask me. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, Miss Family Values, Miss Christian Nationalist, that's what she calls herself. She's getting a divorce. She doesn't like gay people very much. She certainly hates trans people. The Bible doesn't really speak to being gay or trans. It's basically, Jesus never mentioned the word homosexuality. What Jesus did talk a lot about, to anybody who's actually looked at the Bible or read it, is divorce. Jesus detested divorce. Yet people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they kind of skipped that passage, didn't they? They didn't, when they were at the hotel, they didn't open the Bible, on the drawer and read it. Total hypocrites. Herschel Walker's another one. He's about his whole life. He's about absent fathers are terrible. It's bad for the black community, bad for America. And he started this campaign with one child that we knew about. And now how many does he have? 2, 3, 4? I think it's 4 now. And he paid for an abortion. Hypocrite, liar, fraud. That's what these evangelicals are. Look at their brand. What is their brand today? It's not family values. I mean, their brand stands for lies, hypocrisy, phoniness, insincerity, sexually abusing children, abortions in secret, and covering up when church leaders molest children, like we saw with the Catholic Church and the Southern Baptist Convention. And now these are the people that may be ushered into office in the House and Senate if Americans lose their minds and vote Republican. Religious freedom, they yell, religious liberty. But no group has done more to attack religious freedom and liberty than the evangelicals. Abortion, for example. Well, that's their religion. They think life begins at conception. Well, for them, But there's a lot of other religions, including Judaism, where no, it does not. They're trying to make everybody live by their version of God, whether they like it or not, trying to jam their religion down people's throats. They've strangled their own religion in the pursuit of political power. Political power is their God, and Donald Trump is their savior. People are abandoning Christianity in record numbers because of this overt politicized behavior. A Pew Research Center report found that by 2070, Christians could make up less than half of the population and as little as a third in 50 years. Meanwhile, the religious unaffiliated, people who either don't believe in God or, quote, just spiritual, they call themselves nuns. They could make up half the population. Currently, about a third or 31% of Christians become disaffiliated with the religion before they turn 30, according to the Pew Research report. And 21% of nuns become Christian as young adults. And those switching rates remain stable. Christians would make up 46% of the population by 2070, while nuns would comprise rather 41%. I got to tell you, the referendum on abortion in Kansas, conservative Kansas, proved beyond a reasonable doubt that people are rebelling against this theocratic behavior. I mean, not just in this country, but even in places like Iran, people are fed up of the mullahs there and the ayatollahs, and they want freedom. People want to make choices for themselves. They don't want to be forced to follow rules of a church they never belonged to. And I don't think people truly understand what this election represents. The upcoming election represents a group, the Republicans, that are all about religion, all about forcing people to abide by their rules. And they might mask it in QAnon. They might mask it in, quote, being called conservative. But it all goes back to the same things. They want to tell you what to do. They want to take away your rights if you disagree with them. And that's why we must be vigilant and get out there and fight back. Because if we don't and we stay silent, they win and America loses. And we will not even be able to recognize this country in a few years if we allow them to get their way. I, for one, am going to fight back, and I hope you do too.
Full Show is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many other platforms.
You're not going to believe this next story. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it myself. Republicans have lost their damn minds. They keep sinking further and further down the rabbit hole of insanity. The latest craziness? 3 conservative candidates for the Grand Ledge School Board in Michigan have earned themselves the nickname the Kitty Litter Caucus. That's right, the Kitty Litter Caucus. That's because they are pushing a discredited claim that the schools are providing litter boxes in school bathrooms for self-identifying furries to use. For those who don't know, furries are when people dress up and role play as cartoon animals. I suppose it's sexual for some people. Others just do it for fun. But Republicans are saying literally that they're putting litter boxes in bathrooms in schools. Is it true? Well, of course not, because Republicans, conservatives, they lie. That's what they do. That's, again, their brand. They'll say or do anything. It's about scaring gullible people to support them. Now, conservative candidate Kim LaFerrette, a local real estate agent, claimed in at least 3 school board meetings that the schools were providing litter boxes for furry identifying students. 3 litter boxes for furry identifying students. The district, of course, has denied the allegation because it's not true. But LaFerrette said, "These were not rumors." That's what she said during a school board meeting. A Grand Ledge teacher informed us of kitty litter incident, but asked that we not use their name out of fear of retaliation. Yeah, of course, the anonymous litter box teacher who spoke out in secret. Oh my God. This is what the Republican Party has come to. This is what they have sunk to, this level. Well, they'll do and say anything. Nothing is beyond the pale. Nothing is too dirty or too low or too much in the gutter or sewer. They're pretending there's furries now. I got to say something. I mean, the priorities of the Republican Party, are they trying to fix education? No. Are they trying to fix America? No. They're running around screaming about the woke and furries, wasting our precious time, wasting money. wasting brain cells, quite frankly. And not only that, but beside pretending that furries exist, they are running around the country trying to ban books they disagree with and burn books they disagree with. Anything with LGBT content they want gone. They're screaming, oh, you're trying to sexualize the kids. No, we're trying to help young people who are LGBT accept themselves and not say want to commit suicide, not feel depressed. And that is because they see themselves included, they'll feel better. But Republicans want to make sure people feel ashamed of themselves. They want to attack sexuality because they're not comfortable with their own sexuality. That's why you get people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Herschel Walker and Mike Pence. Clearly not comfortable with their own sexuality. They walk around with a deal of anger and bitterness and shame. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to make sure young people don't turn into a Mike Pence, which is very unhealthy. And the other thing these people are doing that's incredibly disturbing is that they keep trying to pretend that other people are pedophiles. They're going to school board meetings across the country and when they're trying to ban books, for example, and they're pointing the finger at their opponents saying, pedophile, pedophile.
This is sick stuff. I mean, is Shapiro complicit in this grooming that we hear about?
He sure is.
Pedophilia is a sickness. No one's going to dispute that. But isn't making false accusations of pedophilia a sickness too? How mentally disturbed do you have to be to accuse another person who's innocent of screwing children? Isn't something profoundly wrong in the head with any person who would do that? I mean, who are these people? What the hell's wrong with them? Or is it because they're morally bankrupt or they're just not medicated properly? I think if you look at the Republican Party today, especially after someone like Liz Cheney lost, and then you look at these school boards where people are running around screaming about, oh, the furries are coming and litter boxes in bathrooms. There are virtually no adults left in the Republican Party. It's like a preschool on crack. That is what we are looking at right now. And this must stop. It's a direct assault on our school system. It's a direct assault on reality and a direct attack on the United States of America. Moving right along, former Hawaiian Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard left the Democratic Party and is already endorsing crazy MAGA cronies running for Congress, including extremist Kari Lake of Arizona. Tulsi Gabbard is a serpent and a phony who would say anything to remain relevant. She was rejected by Democrats, so she switched parties with one of the most bitter speeches I've ever heard.
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness.
It's interesting because Gabbard's father was an anti-gay activist in Hawaii. Tulsi had appeared in ads with her father denouncing gay people when she was a kid. And when Gabbard finally ran for president, she apologized to the LGBTQ community.
In my past, I said and believed things that were wrong. And worse, they were very hurtful to people in the LGBTQ community and to their loved ones. Many years ago, I apologized for my words and, more importantly, for the negative impact that they had. I sincerely repeat my apology today.
Two-faced Tulsi seemed pretty woke there, didn't she? She seemed contrite. Now that she's no longer a Democrat, the mask comes off and she can come out of the closet and be her true self once again. A born-again bigot. Tulsi is also one of Vladimir Putin's biggest cheerleaders in this country. Other than Donald Trump, of course. Here she is once again parroting Moscow's party line. She's Moscow's spokesperson. She's Putin's parrot.
And above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war.
So let me get this right, Tulsi. Putin attacks Ukraine, and it's those who help Ukraine in the United States defend it for its freedom against Moscow who are dragging us to nuclear war. It's Ukraine that's going to get us into nuclear war. It's Democrats, not the actual dictator who put hundreds of thousands of troops on the border of Ukraine and crossed in and killed as many people as possible before his army was repelled. It's not Vladimir Putin who's going to be responsible for nuclear war, the only leader actually threatening nuclear war. It's Biden, right? Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Yeah, it's crazy, the things that Gabbard says. But Republicans are going to embrace her because they're desperate for someone who used to be a Democrat, a former Democrat, to support their cause. But I mean, back to this whole thing with Russia, because it's driving me crazy. What Gabbard proposes is nothing short of allowing Putin to use nuclear blackmail. She's giving a green light to Russia, China, North Korea, and even Iran to invade other countries. And if you stand up to them, you're the one who's encouraging nuclear war. If you don't give them other countries to put in their back pocket, you're encouraging nuclear war. So standing up to tyrants, bad. That's bad. But giving tyrants who invade other countries everything they want, oh, that's great. What you're doing is helping world stability. Good riddance, Tulsi. Good riddance to Tulsi Gabbard. She is a disgrace to this country. She is clearly in Putin's pocket. I mean, I don't know if she's just ideologically in sync with Putin. Is it compromat? Do the Russians have something on her? Is she afraid of some secret they're going to let out? Because it seems like it must be something that bad for her to continuously parrot Putin's party line. Or maybe she's just a bad person trying to get business deals with Russia. I don't know the answer, but I do know that every single chance Tulsi gets, she takes the side of Moscow and goes against Washington. That's just a fact. And that's just something that people need to think of every time they hear Tulsi Gabbard and her hypocrisy and her phoniness and her two-faced serpent routine. Now it's time for my interview with Sean Strub. He's the mayor of lovely Milford, Pennsylvania, and I've been there several times. It's an amazing town to spend a weekend in. You have a cute, quaint little town. You've got camping. Anyway, he's the mayor of Milford, Pennsylvania, and he's also the author of Body Counts, a memoir of activism, sex, and survival. Sean, welcome to the show.
You're the openly gay and HIV positive mayor of Milford, Pennsylvania, a small town in a conservative state. How do you break through to voters? And are there lessons Democrats can learn from your campaign?
You know, ultimately, it's about having the voters know you as a neighbor rather than as some other kind of label. I've been very outspoken about my political beliefs and my HIV status and so on, but I've also been really engaged in community endeavors that transcend partisan politics, you know, civic improvement efforts and the arts festivals in particular. So that has gotten me to interact with a lot of people that I might not have met otherwise. And they got to know me and, you know, maybe weren't as afraid of me being a Democrat as they thought.
Are there any lessons for Democrats nationally? How do they break through in some of these areas that aren't friendly to Democrats?
I think there are sort of two things. One is kind of, you know, mechanical, you know, in terms of organizing. What we have really failed to do as a party is to support the creation of the kind of permanent political and campaign infrastructure at the local precinct level. You know, the Republicans, every school board position, every township auditor, township supervisor, whatever it is, if it's on the ballot, they have a candidate for it and they have support for those candidates. They do a lot of training at the grassroots level. They provide money to their county committees and to local candidates. And the Democrats do far, far, far less of that.
Why is that? I mean, it seems like would be an obvious thing to do. Why isn't it being done?
You know, it's also focused on the television media markets, and that's where the money goes. And I think it's also about thinking longer term. The Republicans, you know, several decades ago, really started focusing on the school boards and on these local races because those were the points of entry for people who would become political leaders. The other problem with it, though, I think, is messaging. We are not seen as the party that's, you know, trying to build the middle class. We should own that ground, and we don't. I'm also not a fan of the demonizing rhetoric on either side. I certainly think it's far, far worse on the right and a lot of the MAGA people who just seem to lie with impunity and, you know, demonize who disagrees with them. But I also don't think it's helpful on the left.
You've seen it all in politics. As we head into the midterms, how is this moment different than what we've seen in the past?
How many times have we heard this is the most important election of our lifetime, right? We've been hearing this in every election cycle. So that's the reality. Each of these elections, we're coming closer and closer and closer to losing our democracy. People I know, whether they are donors or volunteers or poll watchers, whatever it is they do, they're doing more and more. The big question is, are young people going to turn out in significantly greater numbers than before?
Okay. You've encountered fascinating people of historic significance. Andy Warhol, Tennessee Williams, artist Keith Haring, and even Studio 54, which I'm jealous of. By pure chance, you were a block away from John Lennon the moment he was shot. Describe what you saw that night and how it impacted you.
I was returning home from dinner and coming down Central Park West. I heard what sounded like, a car backfiring. I turned the corner onto 72nd Street and I saw a police car coming from way down Columbus Avenue with its lights on, and you could tell it was moving fast. And then I realized there was a little commotion. So I got there virtually the same time the first police car.
Within 2 minutes of the time I got there, they brought out Lennon. He was limp. He had blood coming outside of his mouth. He had his glasses on, and there were maybe 5 or 6 police officers holding him, carrying him, putting him in the back seat of a car. Very quickly, Yoko was with him.
In terms of how it affected me, that was a very difficult time for me. I didn't realize it at the time, but in retrospect, I was traumatized by it. It was, incredible violence. And it wasn't that I was that big of a Beatles fan, but I'd seen John Lennon in the neighborhood with his son, Sean. There was kind of a couple of weird things that arose out of it. One was that there was someone, I think was a mentally ill person who became obsessed with me and created a whole website accusing me of being part of a CIA plot to kill John Lennon and crediting my success to having played ball with the CIA. And it's like, weird, bizarre conspiracy thing. He was obsessed with both Kennedy assassinations. He was also a Holocaust denier. And he posted hundreds of newspapers. I'm not kidding. It was several thousand of these that referenced me and other people. That got so intense, it became serious. And he was publishing the address of my business in Milford and urging people to come here and shoot me down in the street like a dog. And the FBI got involved. It was all like a bizarre thing.
And that was even before the internet.
You're right. That's true. He didn't get arrested or anything, but he kind of moved on to other things. We figured out who it was.
Another chance encounter you had was with Donald Trump's dirty trickster, Roger Stone. Describe your fascinating encounter with Stone, who's in the news again for trying to bring down the country.
When I was in Washington in the late 70s and the early 80s, there was this kind of this emerging closeted gay political milieu. The stigma of the closet was so great, and it gave us so much fear of being outed. I had met Roger Stone several times. I knew people who knew him quite well. I knew about some dirty tricks he had played, not in a big public political way, but with individuals who were closeted and his adversaries. And one time at the St. Mark's Baths, and I saw him at St. Mark's Baths, and I said, "Hey, Roger," and started talking to him. It was absolutely positively him. And he denied that he was Roger Stone. He gave me some other name. That's tough to miss, the tattoo of Richard Nixon on his back.
Yeah, that's probably a dead giveaway.
It's a dead giveaway. I mean, everybody knows that now.
Are you surprised this guy you saw at the Tubs at the sauna is in the news again for, what amounts to, in my opinion, treason? This guy he's surrounded by militias, seems to be the connect between Donald Trump and these militias. And here he is doing these horrible things and trying to undermine democracy.
He just comes out of that arena of politics that lacks any scruples or integrity at all. There have always been those people in politics. One big difference, of course, now is that, we've had a president who encourages them and supports them and facilitates violent and destructive behaviors. We've never had to deal with such a large group of people who believe bizarre conspiracy theories, who don't believe in science, who don't respect expertise.
You mentioned science, and you talk about Anthony Fauci in your book. He's become a household name because of COVID. However, before COVID, he was known for the HIV epidemic. In your view, what should his legacy be on HIV/AIDS?
It's complicated. I think it's important to see him through a political lens. I don't know that there's anybody in such a senior position in the federal government who has lasted through so many different presidential administrations. In 1983, when it was very well established, there were not serious scientists who believed in casual transmission of HIV. We knew that whatever this pathogen was, it was spread through sexual contact and mucous membrane. But Fauci published an article that suggested casual household transmission of HIV. And it was wildly hyped, big article in the New York Times. They ended up in a later edition of the Times changing the headline somewhat. Utterly inappropriate. It was wild scaremongering. But it was at a time when Congress was considering funding for what would become Fauci's lab. And I think Fauci knew better at the time that article was published. And I think this goes to kind of a real different approach to public health. Those experts who believe they need to sometimes manipulate the public's thinking or mislead the public towards some desirable end versus those who believe, the truth is always paramount. And Fauci's never apologized for this, which kind of sticks in my craw. When I wrote about it in my book, he was asked about it, and then he had some sort of rebuttal to it that he, mistold the history of it. People make mistakes. I make mistakes. Everybody, federal bureaucrats make mistakes. But when there's an unwillingness to really, truly be accountable for your own mistakes, it calls into question, everything else.
I was surprised when I read that in your book as well about the pneumonia drug. You became active in gay politics when you left Washington to move to New York. And one of your early successes was getting Tennessee Williams to sign a groundbreaking fundraising letter for the newly formed Human Rights Campaign Fund. You had a colorful and intense meeting with Williams. Take us there.
When Steve Endine, who started the Human Rights Campaign Fund as a PAC, as part of Gay Rights National Lobby, this is going to get launched with a direct mail fundraising letter that Alan Barron, who was my mentor, also an Iowan, was helping put together. And Alan was working on the letter. We were just going to try and find a celebrity to sign it. There were some prominent people who had supported gay rights at that time. But at a conversation at Alan's house one night, the younger of us, we said it had to be somebody openly gay. Well, then, okay, who would that be? Because there really weren't people openly gay who were prominent. Someone suggested Gore Vidal, and Alan Barron said, no, he's not going to do it. He's going to run for the Senate in 82. He won't do it. And nobody knew him anyway. Then after Gore Vidal's name came up, I thought, well, Tennessee Williams is a writer. I knew him. And so I said, well, how about Tennessee Williams? And they all thought that was great. So then it became my mission. I wrote to him, said there was something I wanted to see him about. On the day of the appointment, I didn't call to reconfirm because I thought there was a pretty good chance he might cancel. He comes and he's unshaven in a bathrobe and, looks like he had had quite a night. Then I get into my pitch, and then he changes the subject and goes back to talking about something else. I'm there 90 minutes and, feeling in the pit of my stomach that this wasn't going to happen. And finally, okay, I need to go. And he said, wait a minute, baby, what about your letter? I had the letter and he signed it. I knew something important was happening then. I was immensely proud of it. I said something like, your signature on this is going to raise, $250,000 for the gay rights movement. And he said, $250,000. He says, I should get some of that. And then got up to go, and he walked me to the door. As I left, he hugged me and he whispered in my ear, it's good to believe in something. And the letter was immensely successful.
You mentioned earlier one of your protests, and that was putting a condom on Senator Jesse Helms, the arch homophobe's house in Arlington, Virginia. But another protest you took part in, I found even more interesting because you grew up in Iowa with a very Catholic family. And here you find yourself with ACT UP protesting inside of St. Patrick's Cathedral. Talk about what that meant to you personally and how difficult that was to go into the cathedral to protest their policies on condoms and HIV.
Obviously the Catholic Church had been difficult in very broad terms, around gay rights stuff and AIDS stuff. But the Archdiocese of New York and Cardinal O'Connor were especially so. And, when it got to the point where, the Archdiocese was buying ads on the subway saying condoms don't work, discouraging people's use of condoms, not allowing even the most basic sort of neutral, sexual health education in schools and things like this, that he became a target. So the proposal was for a demonstration at St. Patrick's Cathedral, interrupt the Mass. And it was incredibly contentious on the floor of ACT UP. I was always supportive. While I can't advocate for interrupting religious services, different, faith groups, I felt a sense of ownership. I spent years and years trying to be a good Catholic. For a while, I thought I had a calling to become a priest. I had given it so much, so genuinely and innocently. And then he combined the sexual abuse stuff, including what I experienced that I touch on a little bit in the book. I had no problem going in. I felt like I had a right to take my redress exactly to the center of the Catholic Church in America, the seat of it. Humor was the most persuasive weapon in anything in ACT UP. There were about 4,500 people on the street outside of St. Patrick's. And then there were a group of us who went inside. And when the priest says the body of Christ, instead of responding in kind, we would say safe sex is moral sex. I support a woman's right to choose, whatever statement we would make at the time. And all along the walls of St. Patrick's, the exterior walls, there's a whole line of blue on either side of these cops. And it ended up about 100 people got arrested, maybe 105 or something. Roughly half were arrested inside the church doing things and half were arrested outside the church. And the next morning, we were blasted by everybody from GMHC, the Human Rights Campaign, I think, put out a press release condemning us. There was not a lot of support for this action at the time. One could argue that right around that time was the peak of the Catholic Church's influence in America. It was pushing back against the religious oppression, the religious forces that oppressed us so profoundly, and we pushed back in a dramatic way.
Aside from politics, during the height of the AIDS epidemic, you suffered enormous loss. You lost your partner, Michael, a lot of friends. You eventually became very sick and were preparing to die. And then, like a miracle, life-saving drugs came along. What was the moment you realized, wow, I might live? I'm probably going to live. And psychologically, what was that realization like?
Michael Callan wrote a book called Surviving AIDS. He went out and talked to what were then called long-term survivors, right? People who lived 2 or 3 or 4 years. And he found they had 3 things in common. The first is they believed someone was going to survive. There would be some people who would make it through and be able to tell the story of what happened. As much as I had heard about how fatal AIDS was, nobody said it was worse than the most fatal form of cancer. So I kind of held on to that. The second was that they could identify a reason to get up in the morning, right? They were raising kids, they were going to school, they were making art, they were building a business. They had something to do. They had a reason to live for. And the third was when asked what they had done to treat the virus, said, well, I did macrobiotics, I did, cucumber juice enemas, I did prayer, I did, meditation, acupuncture, AL721, rib of iron, whatever it is. They were going out looking for survival and trying all these different things. That had an enormous effect on me. I always believed someone was going to survive. I always had plenty to do. My life felt like I've been on a mission. Then when combination therapy came out, when I went on it, within a few weeks, I described it as like the virus draining from my body. We had seen treatments that worked to some extent for a little while. So there wasn't confidence that this was going to work for everyone or that it would work for a long period of time. But I knew I was getting better. I, was just really had gotten to the point of focusing on my life right now. I was really fortunate to meet someone in 1992. We're still with. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary. Our time together was precious and made more so by that sort of ticking clock. Then from the mid-90s to 2000, it was like my planning window started to get bigger. And I would say it was around 2008 or 2009, maybe 2010, when it was not a constant thought. Now, I'm pretty sure I'm much more likely to die of something else.
You endorsed Bill Clinton early in his first presidential campaign. You later expressed regret for that endorsement. What's your opinion now of his presidency looking back?
In broad strokes, it was just a vast expansion and extension of the neoliberalism that I think we're paying a price for today. As the party drifted away from, fundamental economic justice issues and labor movement and things like that. So overall, the presidency historically, I kind of see it as that. It was a time of incredible growth and movement for LGBT rights as we became a political force. I had met Clinton in 1981 or 82, and it was at a time when I was like coming out to everybody. He was at a DNC meeting talking with someone I knew well. And maybe this was the year after the March on Washington or something in 79. But I started talking about, gay stuff. And my friend who was closeted was deeply uncomfortable by this, right? And Bill Clinton was fascinated. I don't think he has an ounce of personal homophobia. So I guess my thoughts on that are pretty complicated too. But I think the country's better off for him being president than the alternatives. That's for sure.
Yeah, I go both back and forth on some cases, like with DOMA and with marriage, and also with Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I'm angered, but then I go and I remember looking back, and it seemed to be there were forces of the right that were rising. And he was even opposed in his own party for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and which created Don't Ask, Don't Tell with Sam Nunn, the senator from Georgia. So I wonder what he could have done. Could he have done more? Or was it, he knew Gingrich was rising. You had this horrible part of the right that has led to our politics today that was coming into view. Could he have done more, or was he a victim of circumstance in your view?
Everybody and everything can always do more. I could do more. You could do more. All of us can do more. But most of us try and do what we can within the context of our lives and positions and other priorities. I think Bill Clinton did as much as we made him do. We had some great allies in the Clinton administration, and we had some real problems.
You've done so much in your career. What are you most proud of? And also, what is your biggest regret or unfulfilled dream?
I tend to be most excited and most proud of what I'm engaged in at the moment. Doing two things. I've been doing this work combating HIV criminalization over the last 10 years. The Saro Project, been involved with. We've kind of helped spark a movement in the U.S. It's become part of a growing global movement addressing the criminalization of disease, particularly HIV. And then the other thing I've been working on is locally is a documentary about the indigenous people of Northeast Pennsylvania, the Lenape, that I've been working with the 3 sovereign federal tribes that are now in Oklahoma and Wisconsin, and about a specific incident in history here. And just developing this relationship with the tribal leadership has had a profound effect on me. In terms of things that, regrets, a lot of the things I've done in my life, I wish I had started them earlier. The biggest regret, I guess, is while I think that, ACT UP and PAUSE and all the things I've been involved with have certainly contributed to helping people with HIV and mitigating a lot of the worst consequences of the epidemic. Overall, we failed to stop this epidemic that's killed 40 million people and has another, 30-some million living with the virus today. And this didn't have to be. Had we had different political leadership, had our own community been organized and it had the greater power at that time, we could have succeeded in saving millions and millions and millions of lives, and we didn't. And yes, we can celebrate what we have achieved, but that shouldn't obscure the fact that this was all unnecessary. This didn't have to happen the way it did.
You've seen it all. Any final thoughts on this moment, on this strange political time we now live in?
I don't think we get past this intense polarization in society by half the country waking up and then agreeing with the other half, or by one party controlling everything from top to bottom. I think we get past it by learning to relate to people differently at a neighbor to neighbor level. I lament that we can't disagree with people and have civil discourse in many cases. So I think that the change will have to come at a very, very local level and individual to individual. It's not about changing anybody's mind. It's about learning how to talk about these issues better. And in the process, you find more common ground than you might imagine. The second thing, I regret that our history isn't better known. We suffer for not being taught in schools. We're getting better at museums and exhibits and things like that. But I think there's so much to learn from our history. And one of the most important things that I fear is not understood is how fragile these gains are that we've made over the last half century and how easily they can be reversed. Roe v. Wade, there are an awful lot of people who never thought that would be reversed. They just couldn't imagine that happening. And it can. These are fragile gains. Activism, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. It's a lifelong struggle.
There's no finish line. That's the one thing I've learned.
There is no finish line. It's just that we urgently need people who build social justice priorities into their life.
Excellent. Anything you'd like to add?
No, other than that I so appreciate your work. I think that a lot of the smaller organizations and the individuals who've made a lifetime commitment to this, I tell funders, dollar for dollar, they're getting a better return on their money than giving, massive sums to some of these big organizations. We need the big organizations. I'm not sounding like I'm dissing them, but we need many, many more people finding their place in this within their own communities in their own ways.
Well, I am honored to hear that. Thank you, Sean.
Full show is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many other platforms. Now we're on to Kanye West, or as he calls himself now, Ye. It's more like boo. I think that would be more appropriate. Anyway, Kanye West goes online and went on this anti-Semitic rant. He said he's going to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people, and capital Jewish, capital people, all caps, he's screaming, Jewish people! And he then accused fellow hip-hop star P. Diddy of being controlled by Jews. Because, that's not an ancient anti-Semitic trope, is it? So then after humiliating his unmedicated self, he goes to Fox News, and Tucker Carlson's going to clean up this big mess and have Ye come across as somebody who's credible, somebody who's reasonable, who's being maligned by the liberals and people who are woke. No, it's not that people are woke. It's not that they're liberal. It's that Kanye West is an asshole who needs to take his medication, and he's coming across as a hardcore anti-Semitic bigot. And Tucker Carlson, as we know, is a white supremacist. There's no doubt about that. He's a bigot. So it's in his interest to make Ye look normal instead of insane. So Ye goes on Fox News, and he gets a softball puff interview from Fox. And Fox, as you know, is a garbage bin of fake news. And what they did was they actually edited out insane, nutty quotes that Kanye West gave during this interview. Never made it off the cutting room floor. They chopped it, they cut it. The people were never supposed to see how crazy this guy is. They edited the interview to make him look like he was normal, when clearly he's not. Thankfully, a Fox employee secretly released the outtakes of that interview. And now the network is feverishly searching for the mole who released these unauthorized cuts. Here is one clip that never aired. You can see it right here on War of the Words with Wayne Besen.
Planned Parenthood was made by Margaret Sanger, a known eugenics with the KKK, to control the Jew population. When I say Jew, I mean the 12 lost tribes of Judah, the blood of Christ, who the people known as the race black really are. This is who our people are, the blood of Christ. This, as a Christian, is my belief. And I believe that if we saw ourselves as more...
That is absolutely disgusting and despicable that they cut that quote and many other crazy quotes from the segment that Tucker Carlson aired. Fox News is a moral sewer, and wading into the deepest depths of that sewer is their brand. But I mean, come on, actively serving as a PR agent for anti-Semites and whitewashing their open expressions of hate? That might be a new low for Fox News, and any new low for Fox News is extraordinary because you didn't think they could actually go any lower, but somehow they always do. But it does beg the question, how many thousands of additional videos has this network edited to cover up hate from homophobes and Jew baiters and racists? How many hateful interviews have we just never seen when they tried to normalize these bigots? This can't be the first time they did it. This must be something that is old hat for the Fox News network. It's probably something that happens on a daily basis. Thankfully, there's a mole, there's a whistleblower, and now we could see exactly who these people are and what they are. But I also want to bring up the fact that there are a good number of Jews, and I have some in my family even, who watch Fox News. What the hell are they doing? Why would any self-respecting Jewish person, A, vote Republican, and B, watch Fox News? Why vote for Republican and why watch Fox News? It's something that is beyond my comprehension. Speaking of anti-Semitism, Trump chastised American Jews for not supporting Israel. Who the hell does Donald Trump think he is? As one, I think it was the Anti-Defamation League, but it might have been another group, said that we don't need him Jewsplaining. The Jewish people love Israel and they support Israel, but that doesn't mean because we are Americans that we have to agree with every single thing they do. I live in America and I don't agree with everything America does. I'm a Democrat. I don't agree with everything the Democrats do. We're human beings. We're complex people. The fact is, Donald Trump was a disaster for Israel. He was the worst president for Israel in Israel's history. The worst thing that Donald Trump did was he let Russia back into the Middle East. He pulled out of the Middle East and gave Russia free reign over there. And now Israel is terrified because there's a big Russian base in Syria and other parts of the Middle East. And Russia can stop Israel from intercepting weapons coming from Iran to Hezbollah in Lebanon. And so Israel has to take a step back and consider what's Russia going to do. And we saw that with Ukraine. All the democracies across the world practically supported Ukraine, and Israel had to hold back because they didn't want to piss off Russia, because Russia could make their lives miserable. Russia, yes, the land of the czars, the land of the pogroms. You know, our families here, and many families are moved to the United States because of the pogroms, to escape Russian tyranny. And now, thanks to Donald Trump, Russia's back in the Middle East, and Jews have to once again consider what the czars of Russia think. Donald Trump was the worst president for Israel. And clearly, on top of that, He's a huge supporter of anti-Semites and racists. He supports white supremacists. We saw what happened in Charlottesville. They were literally chanting, "Jews will not replace us," with tiki torches.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
And Donald Trump was asked about this, and he said, "Oh, there's some very fine people on both sides," as if neo-Nazis were just another constituency. Yeah, I don't think so. So how could any sane Jewish person not look at the coalition the Republicans have put together? And I know, and say, this is not the party for me. And I've spoken to some of these right-wing Republicans and their delusions. And what they say is, oh, politics makes strange bedfellows. Yeah, in some cases, but you should never get into the bed with neo-Nazis and white supremacists. They're kind of like bed bugs. You're never going to get into a bed with them. And ultimately, the bed's going to be destroyed and you along with it. So I don't want to hear strange bedfellows. These are bed bugs. And Donald Trump loves them. And they love him. And he's in their coalition. And any Jewish person that goes and votes for the Republicans with this right-wing coalition that clearly hates Jews has got to be out of their fucking minds. And now, I hesitate to tell anybody, what they should do in terms of voting with their religion, but in this case, it's quite clear. When you have crazies like this in your coalition, there's no excuse. You've got to break up that coalition until these degenerates, these white supremacists, these neo-Nazis are out of the Republican Party and they condemn them. No Jewish person should vote for Republicans, and certainly not for Donald Trump, who's encouraged this. Let me tell you something. If Republicans win with the help of Jewish people, it will not end well for Jews. When has totalitarianism, when has fascism, when has supporting white supremacy, when has backing neo-Nazis ever ended well for the Jewish people? Never. And it won't this time. Think about it. I hope you think about it. Because our lives really may depend on it. I said that earlier about the elections. Our lives may depend on it. They might. But for Jewish people to vote for this sick, twisted, right-wing coalition that clearly hates us is something that is just incomprehensible. A New York Times Siena poll found that the American people were poised to return the GOP to power. With early voting already underway, the poll found that 49% of likely voters plan to vote for a Republican to represent them in Congress, compared to 45% who plan to vote for a Democrat. Women who identified as independent and favored Democrats by 14 points in September have reversed course and now back Republicans by 18 points. More than a third of independent voters and a smaller but noteworthy contingent of Democrats said they were open to supporting candidates who reject the legitimacy of the 2020 election, as they assign greater urgency to their concerns about the economy than to fears about the fate of the country's political system. All I can say to that is, wow. People, I don't think, comprehend the stakes in this election. Republicans are selling the lie that we must choose between low prices and authoritarianism. The dictator's playbook, that democracy is too messy to work, and so we need a strong man like the orange sun god, Donald Trump. Gas prices are temporary while fascism is permanent. Once democracy is gone, you never again have a voice in who runs your government. Do you want your children to vote? Do you want your grandchildren to vote? Do you want to live in a country with free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought? They're all under attack by Republicans. Do you really want to tell your children and grandchildren, I surrendered your future, I took away your future because bread prices were slightly higher than they were the year before? This makes absolutely no sense to thinking people. Inflation, for example, is an international problem. Joe Biden did not cause it. If Joe Biden caused it, why are there high prices in the United Kingdom? Why are there high prices in Germany? Why are there high prices in Australia and Asia? Joe Biden, he's like this senile old fool in the minds of Republicans. On one hand, on the other hand, he's this all-powerful guy who can make sure gas prices are high in Germany and Sweden. It doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction. Yes, the Democrats did pump money into the economy, and that did raise the prices a little bit. But the alternative was so much worse than what they did. The alternative was a disaster. Had the Democrats not intervened during the COVID shutdown, we would likely have experienced widespread destitution and bankruptcies. We would have experienced destitution like nothing we've seen since the Great Depression. Is that what people want? Is that what they wanted when people were desperate and couldn't pay their rent and couldn't pay for food, that the government didn't help? Or is it better that we pay a little bit higher prices now and save people, millions of Americans, from losing everything? You know, I understand that gas prices are high. I understand that people are paying more at the pump, but at least you're not sleeping in your car, because that's what would have happened had the Democrats not intervened and tried to help millions of people get back on their feet after the pandemic and lockdown. It's also worth pointing out, I don't understand why people would ever vote for a Republican to fix the economy. They are worse on the economy. Obama had to clean up the mess left by George W. Bush, and Clinton had to clean up the mess left by George H.W. Bush. Every time Republicans are president, the Democrat has to sweep up the mess. And now it's no different. Trump destroyed the economy with his ridiculous, ineffective trade sanctions, which not only raised prices in terms of with China, but also upset our allies in Europe. He picked fights with our European allies over and over again, and it hurt the economy. And then we had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of additional COVID cases, which slowed the economy because Donald Trump wanted to go on a crusade against masks. That's why our economy slowed down. And that created supply chain issues. Joe Biden didn't cause that. The Democrats didn't cause that. And here's a fact of why you should never vote for a Republican to fix the economy. Since 1933, the economy has grown at an annual rate of 4.6% under Democratic presidents and 2.4% under Republicans. Republicans have no plan to stop or reduce inflation, no plan to revive the economy, no idea how to prop up the stock market. What do they have a plan for? Well, they have a plan for something, and that is to send in the clowns. This week, it was reported that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the crazy lady from Georgia, is going to create frivolous partisan revenge committees if Republicans gain control of the House of Representatives. The New York Times reports, quote, Marjorie Greene said, there is going to be a lot of investigations. And she said, I have talked with a lot of members about this, and we're going to be investigating. Is that what you want? Do you think that's going to help the economy? Do you think Marjorie Taylor Greene making false accusations and wasting millions of dollars of taxpayers' money to investigate Democrats for nothing is going to lower your gas costs? Is it going to help your family? Obviously, it's not going to. They're also, oh, by the way, they're going to impeach Joe Biden. We're going to have a Biden impeachment. They're going to go after Hunter Biden. Is that really what you want to see over the next 2 years? Do you really think that's going to revive the economy? And if Representative Kevin McCarthy becomes majority leader, he is going to embrace Marjorie Taylor Greene, because we know he had his own Republican sideshows. Remember Benghazi, the show trial that he led? He was clearly creating a scandal where none existed. And this was specifically designed not to figure out what happened in Benghazi, which would have been okay, but it was designed to damage Hillary Clinton and stop her from becoming president. Here, remember this quote from McCarthy?
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping. Why? Because she's untrustable.
Because of this quote, he never became Speaker of the House. He was shown to be a complete idiot who had no common sense. I mean, who would actually say that they designed the Benghazi committee to smear Hillary Clinton? I mean, that's a special brand of stupid, if you ask me. If Republicans gain power, GOP obstruction will derail all serious efforts by the Biden administration to turn the economy around. Instead of adult solutions, Republicans will distract us with a sort of circus acts and sideshows. Meanwhile, the lives of millions of Americans will deteriorate. And newly elected Marjorie Taylor Greene clones will spread craziness and chaos, not just on Twitter, but in the House and the Senate. And worst of all, the international implications. Kevin McCarthy told us this week that if Republicans take over, they were going to reduce the aid to Ukraine. We are living in the most perilous time since the run-up to World War II. America and its allies face economic troubles, climate change, rising nationalism, and two hyper-aggressive revanchist nuclear powers. With Putin's invasion of Ukraine and Xi Jinping's elevation to dictator, the decisions we make are a matter of life and death. They really are. And if we elect fanatics, fascists, and fools, Americans will suffer far more than voters seem to fully realize. And the most immediate threat is the Russia-loving Marjorie Taylor Greene and now Kevin McCarthy saying that they're going to bully their colleagues to end support for Ukraine. And this America First gang is already carping on social media that we are wasting money supporting Ukraine at a moment when many Americans are suffering financial hardship. You know, that's what we heard on the run-up to World War II also, that we shouldn't be giving money to Europe and Great Britain. We shouldn't help Churchill defeat Nazi Germany because it's a waste of money. We need to focus on America first. We need to turn inward. Yeah, how'd that work out? How did that go? It ended in World War II and a Holocaust. And that's exactly what's going to happen now. If we let the same appeasement, America first crowd that allowed Hitler to take over large swaths of Europe, if that we let them run loose and hand over Ukraine to Putin, we are in deep trouble. The chickens will come home to roost. America will eventually be pulled into this, and will do so from a much weaker standpoint. Ukraine has done a remarkable job fighting. Who thought they'd still be around fighting the Russians today? They are weakening the Russians every day, and the weaker they make Russia, the less we have to deal with them. Russia is a menace. They interfere in our elections. They fund right-wing neo-Nazi parties across the United States and Europe. They are a monkey wrench in international relations, and they are a belligerent actor who is a force against democracy and wanting to reinstitute some form of the Soviet Union, maybe not ideologically, but in terms of land. And we are on the cusp of defeating this power. We are on the cusp of doing what no one thought was possible. And right here, right now, when we have a chance for victory with Ukraine, we have Kevin McCarthy and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the America First appeasement crowd ready to hand Ukraine back on a silver platter, which would do what? Not only empower and embolden Russia, which is going to go after Moldova next and possibly go after NATO countries. The Baltics are going to go after Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia. But it's also going to encourage Xi and China to go after Taiwan. If we appear weak, and we will appear weak with these guys, I can guarantee you Taiwan's going to be attacked. It still may be attacked. But I think if we back down and don't help Ukraine, it's almost a certainty that we're going to have a war on two fronts with Russia and China, one that could end the world. They want to create Xi and Putin and the Republicans such as Trump and Green. They want to create a world where there's no human rights. They want to create a world where there's no democracy. They want a theocracy. That's what they're after. They want authoritarianism because they have authoritarian personalities. Are we going to let them? Hell no. But if you vote for Republicans, that's exactly what you're doing. You're enabling the worst elements of our society to create a very dangerous world, one that's going to suck us in and spit us out. Additionally, these Republicans are great friends with Saudi Arabia and Brazil. Bolsonaro in Brazil, he's another tyrant. He's a Trump clone. And then you have Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, in Saudi Arabia, a murderer who killed the journalist of the Washington Post, Khashoggi. And Republicans don't give a damn. They don't care because they don't believe in democracy and human rights. And as bad as it's going to be the next 2 years, all is going to fall apart in 2024 if we elect these election deniers. I guarantee you this is going to be a nightmare. Let's fast forward to 2024. When most Americans have buyer's remorse and want to bring back Democrats. In a hypothetical presidential race, Donald Trump loses by, say, 10 million votes. However, it's too late because in the false name of fixing the economy, voters elected conspiracy theorist election deniers in 2022. And these MAGA governors and secretaries of state who control elections are now able to thwart the will of the people and reject the votes. They're able to say, we don't want the voters. We don't want to respect the voters. We're going to throw this back to Republican legislatures. And they're going to choose. And voting no longer matters. And the moment that happens, and the moment Donald Trump or a Donald Trump clone is installed in 2024 because we elected these conspiratorial election deniers in 2022, democracy is over. And you think the Supreme Court's going to save us? Hell no. They're on the side of the dictators. They're on the side of authoritarianism. We all saw what they did and what they're planning to do. This is really profoundly disturbing. I mean, the Washington Post found that a majority of Republican nominees on the ballot this November for the House, Senate, and key statewide offices, 291 in all, have denied or questioned the outcome of the last presidential election. This is dangerous. Candidates who have challenged or refused to accept Joe Biden's victory, 51% of the 569 analyzed by the Washington Post, are running in every region of the country in nearly every state. Republican voters in 2 states nominated election deniers in all federal and statewide races. Do you not think these chickens are going to come home to roost? Do you not think we're going to be in a situation where we have a constitutional crisis, where a Democrat wins and they reject it? Because they only believe now, this Republican Party, the only legitimate office holders are Republicans, that they're incapable of losing. If Republicans win, it's great. It's a fair election. If Democrats win, it's fraud, voter fraud. We're going to run into an abyss if this occurs. And I don't think people get it. They're focused, oh, my gas is a little high. Let's vote for fascists. Not going to work out. It's not going to end well. It's not going to be good. If Republicans take over in 2022 and then they go into the elections of 2024, promising to make sure that a Republican becomes president and that they will not respect the vote, the choice suddenly faced by the sane majority of Americans is domestic warfare, literally fighting these terrorists in the street like we saw on January 6th, but worse, in all 50 state capitals. So you're going to be literally fighting people. You'll be leaving your comfortable homes and your comfortable jobs and fighting for your country. So that's one option. The other option is you run away and leave the country to be safe, or you give up and you live as cowed citizens in a corrupt autocracy with Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or some other clone, essentially the king, with the United States of America as we know it over. Of course, even if you decide to leave the country and escape, where are you going to go? Because Republicans have already created spheres of influence. They've already given China Taiwan. They've already given Russia Ukraine and other parts of Europe. There's nowhere to escape. We're going to have a world dominated by a Trumpian United States, a Xi China, and a Putin Russia. The entire world's screwed at that point. There will be no human rights. There will be no democracy. There will be no decency. It will be a world of big lies. Quite frankly, be Orwellian. It's not a place I want to live. I don't know about you. When you vote, you need to really think about this, about how important your vote is, because we are really looking at catastrophe. This isn't a normal election, and the Republicans aren't normal people. This is the bottom of the barrel. Hillary Clinton called them deplorables. She got criticized for that. She was being too nice. And Ukraine reminds us that civilization is fragile. One moment, Ukrainians were living free. They were carefree, enjoying nightclubs, restaurants, shopping malls, coffee houses. And the next day, they were separated from their families, hiding in bunkers and sleeping in filthy war-front trenches, gripping cold machine guns, as ear-piercing mortars furiously dropped around them. I'm afraid that too many Americans naively vote as if they are immune from such deprivation and upheaval. Instead of recognizing that their political actions have severe consequences, they are like zombies, sleepwalking our nation into an inferno of idiocy that could spell the end of modern civilization as we know it. We are blindly and blithely throwing away our future for what? For what? It's time we wake up, America, and fight back and stand up and speak out against what is happening right now, because it is not normal, it is not natural, and it is wrong what the Republicans have done to this country. Wake up, America, stand up, speak out. Do what you must. We have to remain a democracy. The world depends on us. It depends on you. We're going to end the show with a fact check. As the midterm elections approach, Republicans are desperately using racist tropes to tie Democrats and black people to crime.
They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. They are not owed that.
Here's the truth. A report from the Justice Department found that white people are responsible for 52% of non-fatal violent crimes. Per capita murder rates were 40% higher in states that voted for Donald Trump. 8 of the 10 states with the highest murder rates have been red states. Contrary to Republican propaganda, GOP-led cities were just as dangerous as cities run by Democrats. Don't believe the lies. Maybe they're called red states because of the blood of homicide victims that's in the streets. Voting Republican to stop crime is a ridiculous waste of time. Be a critical thinker and know the facts. Don't believe the Republican lie that they are pro-police are good on crime. This is Wayne Besen's War of the Words podcast. You can catch the show on YouTube as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many other venues. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, see you next time.